presentation explaining to you what has been found through the study, etc., I'd just like to briefly introduce our panel and then we'll take the discussion forward. So firstly, we have Ms. Perveen Mann, who is the country head of FNF Pakistan. We have Mr. Ubaidurrahman Zia, who is Senior Research Associate at STPI. We are joined by Dr. Ghulam Samad Online. He's Senior Research Specialist at Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation, which is CAREC for short. We have Mr. Shaukat Ali, who is Regional Program Expert, South Asia at the Alliance for Rural Electrification. We're also joined by Mr. Ehsan Javed, who is Research Fellow at the South Energy Center. And we have Mr. Himanta Vitanage, who is Executive Director, Center for Environmental Justice, Sri Lanka. Apologies in case I pronounced your name wrong, Mr. Himanta. And of course, we also have Dr. Khalid Waleed, who is Research Fellow at STPI. I thank you all for taking up the time for today's session, and I really look forward to learning from all of you and giving your perspective on the topic as well. So, without further ado, I'll now be requesting Ms. Lam for her keynote address. So,
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Friedrich Naumann Foundation Pakistan office and also on behalf of STPI, I would like to welcome everybody here present in this conference room and also at home or in the office digitally to this very pertinent and crucial topic, which is not only a topic for South Asia. I think it's a burning topic that the whole world is struggling with. How to find a sustainable, reliable energy policy that actually meets the demands of consumers and of industry as well. And I'm really grateful that all of you are interested in this topic, and I would like to convey my thanks to those researchers who actually compiled this study, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be a major contribution to a very pertinent political debate. Right now, just when you look at the newspapers in Pakistan, again, the topic of energy crisis, and especially for consumers, is a very huge pressing issue that actually affects specifically the more vulnerable sectors of the society very, very much. And this doesn't only hold true for Pakistan, that holds true for the whole of the region and not only for South Asia, but it's a similar reality that we face in different contexts as well. Because energy is a strategic industry and it's detrimental to economic development, but also to the humble standard of living of every citizen. We all consume and need energy, either to sustain our daily lives or for production for business needs. But unfortunately, energy makes it into the headlines and sometimes also to the debating tables of politicians, very often only in times of crisis. And one of these disrupting factors was actually the war in Ukraine, when suddenly also here in this region, energy prices were again not on the agenda, and let's say the reason for hikes in energy prices and scarcity was mainly attributed to this external factor, which obviously was a huge driver in prices, because most of our countries obviously acquire their energy on the international markets. So then if you have an exogenous disrupting factor, obviously it's going to hurt you. However, if we are honest and we take a deeper dive into the situation, these exogenous factors only hit an economy that hardly if the structural background is actually already vulnerable. And for the countries in South Asia, I think there's one common denominator. All of our countries have growing populations, fastly growing populations, which means we need more energy resources for the households and consumers, but also for industry, because we need economic activities to sustain this growing population. And while we're having the growing population and the growing energy need on one hand, we do have outdated grids and very inefficient productions of energy that can by no means actually support this growing demand in energy. And it's not only the grid, lots of energy is actually already lost before it ends up either in the business or in the household. And then we do have the economic framework around it. Here in Pakistan, one key term is circular debt, which describes a system of governmental subsidies to actually ease the pain of the end consumer, while at the same time contracts with producers have a different price structure, which in the end cannot sustain itself. And in that respect, causes a vicious circle of public debt, and at the same time still also a lot of need and frustration on the part of the end consumer, because energy prices do go up. They are reflected in rising prices for the commodities that need to be transported, that need to be produced, and at the same time also private use of energy. So it's very critical for us to have a look at the general structure. How do we actually produce energy, increase the efficiency of energy production, and also diversify its sources. And I think with the change in global patterns, all our countries, and I'm not only referring to South Asia, are also discussing the issue of decreasing the dependency of international markets and increasing the relevance also of decentralized local solutions, depending on geography, topography, but also distributing the risks from focusing only on one or two sources of energy. Until now, it's mainly fuel sources, but also consider other renewable, more modern sources and different types of production. This is a task that all of us have to do. Diversify our sources, diversify our means of production in order to be more sustainable, and also to be more flexible according to local demands, because the demands may be in a rural community somewhere or in a big major urban hub are obviously completely different. And by diversifying the energy production and structure and also the system behind it, I think it's the need of the day to actually look forward to a future where this growing demand can be met, and at the same time pressure is taken out of the political system, and some of the imbalances that we have in the financial management of the system can also be met. And in that respect, I was very grateful for this very meaningful work and the stakeholder discussions that our experts have done and completed over the last year. And thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more in detail about this very meaningful and future-oriented work. Thanks a lot, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Sam. We will not be keeping you waiting. Next, we have the base resolution, which basically will highlight the findings and the recommendations.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Birgit. That was extremely well pointed. I think what I'm going to do is here that just like I think Manur mentioned, Ms. Birgit mentioned that last year we sort of initiated this study in collaboration with many of the stakeholders that are present over here. That was on energy security in South Asia and how we can make a very good case of transitioning towards the sustainable energy sources. But so what I'm going to do is perhaps take you through this sort of a longish slide deck, but the point that everyone needs to sort of take care is that nothing's actually going to happen unless we bring a very strong political ownership in the whole debate that we're actually having here today. We don't address the regulatory inconsistency that exists, not just within any of the member countries, but a lot of framework needs to be put in place as a whole if we are sort of to take this thing forward. So just for a quick introduction, my name is Obed. I'm currently taking forward the Clean Energy Transition Program at STPI. And this work has been sort of very thankful to FNF for supporting this work. And what we're going to do is sort of see how we take the agenda forward. So I'll very quickly start with a very brief background and the significance, which I fully understand that most of the stakeholders are very well aware of the whole CCC crisis, which South Asia is forwarding. Then a very quick overview of what the methodological approach that we have adopted, and then how we actually see the whole agenda. And then I'll be leaving you all here with some of the very quick recommendations and policy action points. Yeah, okay. So now, I mean, I think this is something that we all fully understand that if we just look at perhaps over the past 3 to 4 years, almost 5 years, and the whole world, particularly the underdeveloped and the developing countries, they have been under this socioeconomic crisis because of the CCC issue that we're going through. We all understand that this region of South Asia, it's actually in the wake of this climate crisis. We still haven't fully recovered from the aftermath of the COVID-19, and most importantly and most significantly, the whole region, even in fact the whole world, is currently going through this socioeconomic turmoil driven by the regional conflicts that have actually, while I mean, definitely the impact has been on each of the sectors, but most importantly, energy actually has been one of the very key critical factors because of the any increase in energy prices or it being actually at the center of the whole socioeconomic development that is happening. So we all fully understand and accept that South Asia as of now is on a very crossroads, and there's a series of overlapping crises that needs to be addressed at the earliest possible. Then definitely energy insecurity is becoming a growing concern because SDG 7 being actually, it sort of acts as a central to all the SDG development. It links to the health security, it's linked to social well-being, it is again linked to energy transition and linked to the whole climate agenda as well. And I think South Asia, I mean, if we look at some of the member countries, if we leave, then again, it is not actually one of the very key contributors to the climate emissions, global emissions, but it is again one of the regions that is very highly susceptible to the whole climate crisis as well. So one of the way forward is again, we'll be seeing in the presentation how there is actually a lack of integration within the South Asian countries. If not again, for all of the member, definitely there have been a lot of engagements going on bilaterally between the countries. But when we actually look at the region as a whole, then there are many member countries that are actually not very effectively pursuing this. So there's a very limited regional cooperation when we're talking about the inter-regional trades, etc. as well. So South Asia definitely is one of the fastest growing regions. Yes, it is, just like I talked about, very susceptible to the climate change. And despite the large connection, the regional connectivity between the countries is very limited. And again, just like I pointed out, if not all, then in many of the cases. So in this backdrop, the study that we actually developed sort of targets these 4 key areas. One was we initially wanted to sort of analyze what is the current status of energy access and progress on SDG 7 across South Asia. I mean, where do it lies with the electricity access, the energy clean cooking fuel technologies access, efficiency and intensity. Then we again sort of analyze what are the energy transition plans of South Asia, which includes its policy commitments, its renewable energy commitment, and most importantly, in this context, that we're actually going to build intellect along with what the countries are actually thinking about their energy transition or the clean energy transition journey. Then again, within the energy trade, the cross-border electricity trade is again one of the most key significant areas. So we'll again see which countries are currently in the process of doing this cross-border electricity trade, what have been the challenges that are facing, what regulatory frameworks are already in place. And then we'll be looking at how this whole approach can actually be taken, even again going beyond this grid interconnectedness, so how through use of different capacity building knowledge and other initiatives, this can also sort of support off-grid renewable energy models within the member countries as well. So just taking lead what Manu mentioned, we sort of adopted a mixed method approach over here. I mean, along with the extensive desk review of these, all of the countries, including the energy profiles, their different values, their cross-border electricity trading projects, their different energy models that are being challenging. So we did sort of this analysis for all of the countries. And apart from this desk review, a lot of recommendations, suggestions, this study is actually going to show you are coming from the set of consultative discussions that we did under this study. So we also had a very dedicated methodological approach for conducting the studies, in which we actually had these structured roundtable discussions where we actually sort of ensured that we had the representation from all of the member countries, all of the 7 or 8 member countries that we actually had. And the key thematic areas that we had for the discussion were the cross-border electricity trade, energy financing, energy policy landscape, and the scope of regional collaborations. And then all of these data sets were sort of analyzed to, we did both quantitative analysis as well as qualitative analysis to come up with the recommendations. So we won't be going, definitely you do have the study, you can always go through that. We'll be touching upon the key initiatives here. So let's start with the very quick overview of where the energy sector of South Asia currently stands. So this actually shows, I mean, just a general overview of what the potential of different sources in the South Asia lies. I mean, leading from the fossil fuels to the renewable energy development, we have sort of highlighted that if you talk about, again, the fossil fuels, then there's a substantial potential in each of the South Asian countries around the indigenous coal that is actually present. So what the total somewhere, I think this is based upon one of the research studies conducted by Shukla, that there's total potential of 133 billion tons of coal, there's 83 trillion cubic feet of gas, then oil is there. And one of the very key important points which we'll be deep diving into is the very high potential that exists in this region because of its demography around the renewable energy. Particularly, there is a big potential of hydropower in countries such as Pakistan, Nepal, and more importantly, given the solar sunshine, the wind and solar potential particularly is also very high. But again, the point of the challenge, which sort of again comes up, is that despite having these high potential, the region still is sort of 66% of its energy used is based upon the imported energy resources. I mean, if we just look at the energy numbers, then we all initially established the fact that the energy demand of the South Asia is very quickly increasing, and the region is yet expected to add over 600 million people in the next 30 days. But again, despite having this fully understanding that the energy demand is definitely increasing, the indigenous resources are there, but despite the fact, because of the limited capacity, 66% of the energy use is imported, and fossil fuels account for almost 80% of the total energy production that is energy in this region. So I think this is where we sort of start analyzing where the issue the problem actually comes up. So this is again based on one of the reports that were actually done by the SARC. And what we can actually see is that one very critical point over here is that if we look at different countries, then of the total energy consumption, almost 84 to 85% of the energy consumed in South Asia is consumed in one country, that is India. And this sort of shows that among the fossil fuels that are generally there, almost, the coal constitutes almost equal to natural gas. Then there is biomass. We'll be discussing biomass, how we sort of not having it in the fossil fuels, but also in the sort of resources that are not used in an efficient or a clean way. So again, moving forward, we'll initially be talking about different indicators of SDG 7 and where do each of these South Asian countries Stan, I think many of you would know what SDG 7 is. Basically, it has three components. The first one that actually talks about the access to electricity. The second one, access to energy, which has two components. That is the access to electricity and then the access to clean cooking fuels and technologies. The second indicator actually shows the share of renewable energy. It also has some different components which we'll dive into. And the third one of the SDG 7 talks about the energy efficiency. So these figures actually show where each of the countries stands in regard to energy access. Okay, let me just set one thing here, that energy access, particularly when we talk about the electricity access, is actually one of the most difficult indicators to sort of keep a track into. The most authentic source that currently does exist are the World Bank repository, but the access is mainly sort of quantified in different tiers. I mean, many of the countries sort of, for example, just talking about Pakistan, we've been hearing that Pakistan has an electricity excess of somewhere around, in some reports we'll be seeing the excess going to almost 77%, which includes the excess that is the grid-based electricity. And in some of the reports, you'll also see Pakistan's electricity excess as high as 95%, which includes any sort of excess, whether it may be from decentralized renewable energy solution, whether it should be maybe from these solar standalone systems. So generally, when we talk about SDG 7, it has its recent updates say that it's actually sort of going to count any sort of excess. Basically, energy excess has different tiers, tier 0, 1, 2, and 3, and 4. As we sort of climb up different tiers, then the impact or the affordability or reliability of that excess sort of keeps on increasing. So this below tier 0, we have the electricity excess of the countries that are falling into any region. So basically in SDG 7 sort of maps those. So if we talk about different countries, as of now, the average access to electricity in South Asia is roughly 95%. Again, talking about any tier, with Afghanistan having the access to lowest population in the region. Pakistan, as per the latest compiled data from the World Bank, has an excess of almost 95%. And among the various countries, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Maldives have achieved 100% electricity access since 2018. Now, when we actually move from electricity to clean cooking fuels and technologies, the access is comparatively much lower, with only 53% of the population having access to this clean cooking fuels and technologies. Again, Maldives with the highest share, and Bangladesh currently is the country with the lowest access, standing at almost 26%. So this is more roughly the status of SDG 7.1 in Asia, South Asia. Then talking about energy intensity and renewable energy, the average intensity again stands across 3.74% again, 3.7 megajoule against the global average of 4.3. The low value of intensity, however, does not necessarily, I mean, for energy intensity, it is basically the number has to be as low as possible, but at the same time, it does not actually directly reflects that a low number indicates that the energy consumption is having in a very efficient manner. A lot of things go on. I mean, the low number at the same time also indicates that the consumption of this energy in the industrial sector or the productive sectors is comparatively very low. So for the case of South Asia, it's more of the latter one than the prior one. Now, when we actually talk about the share of renewable energy in total primary energy supplies, as per the third indicator of SDG 7, so basically, SDG 7 in itself includes the share of biomass within the renewable energy sources as well as hydro. But again, this needs to be tackled in a careful manner, because the inefficient burning of biomass is generally not counted as a renewable or a green energy source. So what we have done is sort of analyze them in the two contexts. If you sort of talk about renewable energy, including biomass as renewable, then the roughly share jumps to around 40%, with Bhutan having the highest and Maldives the lowest share. And if we do not include that inefficient burning of biomass as the renewables, then the share drops down to only 10%, which is well lower than the target that is, or the values that are required to meet the SDG 7 target. Yeah. So now this is a very interesting supply and demand analysis that was again done in more of the SAARC reports, which actually indicates where each of these countries lie in their demand as well as their domestic supply. So this is what actually sort of create this very good case for the regional collaboration, which we can be, because we can see that, I mean, if we look at the energy challenges faced by South Asian countries in a holistic manner, you can actually see that the problems for some of the countries are very likely. Many of the countries are sort of operating with a surplus capacity, just like in the case of Pakistan. I mean, in one of the seasons, they sort of have this very high generation, such as in case of Pakistan, it goes up to 28,000 megawatt, and in the winter season, it drops down to almost like 11,000 megawatts. Same is the case, not same, but pretty much we also see a lot of similar cases in the other South Asian countries. So what actually the potential where here actually lies is that depending upon the peak load and a lower load, there is a very good collaboration potential that can exist between the South Asian countries. The energy, the electricity in the high peak season from one actually country can actually be sort of traded into the other countries that at the same time will be facing that energy deficit. So that is again, this demand actually shows a very good case, and I believe many of the speakers here will be further highlighting this in detail. Going forward, this is sort of what shows the emission profile of the South Asian countries. What we can already see is that there is a very rapid increase in emission. Definitely in the last few years, there is a drop generally coming because of the reduction in energy demand or energy consumption that actually happened after the COVID-19. So there is a drop, but generally the overall trend of emissions in the South Asia is constantly increasing, mainly driven by the extensive or increasing use of the fossil fuels, particularly the coal. So I think, again, just coming to the point, the potential for regional cooperation, I mean, we all fully understand do exist, but where do we exactly stand as a whole region? What are the generally the challenges which needs to be uptaken? So again, just like I initially mentioned, if we talk about South Asia region as a whole, or we sort of compare it with other regions, then as per the report of Asia Regional Integration Center Index, the inter-regional trade share in South Asia is just 5.6%, which is the lowest trading share across the all other regions. So, I mean, just like, I think just one point that I mentioned at the very start was that this is actually being driven by the fact that there's a lot of, not just the disconnect, but the political ownership, the political willingness, even the willingness of the private sector to sort of come and collaborate within the regional is very low. Most of the countries, most of the private sectors, they sort of want to have this more collaboration with the European countries and the European state. That is where most of the generally at this point, we're talking about the electricity, energy, or the other tradings, because for the electricity, there is, again, even with the European countries, there's no such programs going on. So when we actually talk about the challenges, then it can be sort of categorized into three themes. One is the developmental challenges, then there are technological challenges, and then there is the finance and the policy, which apparently is one of the most critical theme. So what needs to actually happen is a good structural economic adjustments. There's a need for decoupling of the economic growth with the environmental. And again, when we talk about these two things, very limited support policies exist for them. Same goes for the technological collaborations. Definitely, some of the South Asian countries again have made the progress, but if we talk about the indigenization of this energy supply chain, then that is again missing substantially from the region. Exactly one of the reasons why it is also very good import-based economy. Going further, this slide actually shows what is the current state of cross-border electricity trade in South Asia. And I mean, let me just state that if we look at over the past years, then there has been definitely the increase. Just from 2015 to 2022, we have seen that the cross-border power transmission has increased from 2.1 to almost 4.2 gigawatts. But I think what the problem here comes up is that it is actually happening bilaterally or between some of the countries and not as a whole on the broader regional level. Many of the countries, especially such as Pakistan, they're not really into this regional trade, some very limited, especially when we're talking about cross-border electricity trade, some very limited developments that happening. For instance, in Pakistan, there's just some import of very few, I think 50 megawatt of electricity coming from Iran. Apart from that, there's no cross-border electricity trade program. But apart from Pakistan, many of the South Asian countries have done some substantial work around this over the few years. So there has been a growth. observed in the cross-border electricity trade. But again, the second issue actually comes up is that when we actually talk about these developments in the renewable energy or the green energy landscape, that is again where we sort of start facing much more challenge, even if we're looking at the bilateral agreements between these countries. There are definitely some renewable energy zones, and how the different countries in South Asia sort of collaborating. For example, Bangladesh is importing from the renewable energy zones at different states. Similarly, Sri Lanka is importing from renewable energy zones. So again, this collaboration is happening, but this needs to be expedited at a much higher level. Then there, again, I won't be going into the details of all of these programs. What we need to understand is that there are some energy trade programs, even Pakistan is there. I believe Dr. Samad shortly will be talking about the CASA 1,000 projects, what are the challenges and the progress around that. We also have these projects of TAPI, IP, and then there's electricity imports from Iran. Similarly, the Bangladesh, Bhutan, and especially India, they have a lot of bilateral agreements going on. You can go through the details of them in the report as well. And then there are also some of the regional cooperation programs, some operating effectively, but others have also sort of dried out. For example, we do have the SAARC framework on regional cooperation. There are different multilateral agreements in the taxation. There is a long history of the landscape that is present in the report. You can actually see that over the past 20 years, where different regional programs and what different agreements have actually come up in the whole cross-border electricity trading scenario. But again, just very quickly summarizing what I have actually mentioned is that the progress is there, but definitely this is a non-uniform progress. Very limited engagements have actually happened around the clean energy space, and a high potential exists to expedite the energy transition collectively. So now, where does the potential actually lie, and what needs to sort of happen as we move forward? I mean, again, just like initially mentioned, that the renewable energy has a very high potential. So, I mean, if we talk about that, South Asia has a potential of almost, just like we previously mentioned as well, how only of this large potential, only 14.6% of hydro, 3.8% in solar, and only 3% in wind has actually been realized. And one of the very key challenges, because why this has not been realized, is again a very high cost of transition that actually exists. Definitely, I mean, while we all understand that renewable energy transition, the low carbon development that makes a environment case, what we need to also sort of understand is that there is the logistical cost associated with all of this transition that needs to be addressed. Then definitely the policy inconsistencies, different frameworks within each country also sort of limits this regional cooperation. And then the last point is around the limited capacity of the member organizations. The next point that actually comes up is around the decentralized renewable energy system, because with the passage of time, the model is going towards a central grid-based model, towards the decentralized models. While again, decentralized renewable energy cannot directly be addressed to regional cooperation, what is important here is how different knowledge sharing platforms, how different capacity building initiatives, and how these different countries can sort of learn from each other's experiences to sort of replicate the best practices that are possible. While definitely this is a regional context, but again, a lot can actually happen in this space as well, because over the past years, the capacity of off-grid renewable energy has been significantly increasing. Going further, again, there's a lot of prospects for international public-private partnerships, because the region as a whole can actually do a lot to sort of mobilize different investments going into their clean energy space. The technology transfer programs within the South Asian region can actually add to a lot of values. Then definitely there are a lot of financing mechanisms that would actually require these different risk-sharing mechanisms for mobilizing these different finance and these partnerships. Then definitely we'll also a bit later we'll be talking about bringing the market competition, the capacity building programs, building the access to finance, and definitely talking the same that innovation and research. So a lot of these potentials, a lot of these aspects can actually be sort of harnessed through some innovation and research and developing some strong international public and private partnerships. Now coming to the very last, that what exactly needs to happen and what are some of the very good recommendations and the way forward. So I'll just very quickly stop for that. I mean, any energy integration in South Asia would actually require some strong interventions in these four spaces. One is, again, I've been talking since the start about bringing this political consistency, bringing the political ownership in this whole debate of this regional collaboration. So, I mean, we need to actually have some regional vision and outlook, because again, just like I talked about, these outlooks, these developments are present at the country level, but when we actually go into the regional space, these visions or outlooks are substantially missing. Again, the political consensus and the sort of what we should also say that political disconnect that exists, or sort of these conflicts that exist between the regions, is also definitely hampering these cross-border electricity trade. We also saw that in the case of CASA as well. Then there are a lot of intergovernmental agreements and the power sector reforms that sort of needs to be bring in. Then again, when we actually talk about the cross-border electricity trade, it's not, again, something that's not very easy. There's a lot of regulatory frameworks that would be required for putting up with the different connections around the grid. There are a lot of regulatory reforms that would be needed on how these are translated into the different national policies around the electricity, how this needs to be sort of come up in different market mechanisms that each of these countries are having. So open access to transmission networks, identification of transmission capabilities, and rules for measurement of imbalances. So again, this is a very good technical subject that needs to be resolved before two countries sort of, again, or a region as a whole goes towards the cross-border electricity trading. Then it's again the technical aspects, which includes the harmonizing the grid codes, the pricing of transmission systems, the regional grid planning. That is again one of the very key important pillars, and then coming up with some dispute resolution mechanisms, because once the countries goes into these agreements, these issues sort of come very quickly. And then the last and not the least is the institutional setups and the coordination mechanisms that are again extremely paramount once we go forward with these developments. So just very quickly, you can again go through the reports that are in front of you with the long sort of wish list of these policy recommendations there, but I'll just be touching upon these 4 areas that if we are to sort of expedite the clean energy transition across South Asia, facilitating the cross-border electricity trade needs to be expedited. Again, we have talked about some of the policy actions, but drafting and setting up the standard operating procedures of activities that are required to initiate and conduct a cross-border electricity trade is again paramount. Addressing the institutional gaps, licensing and regulatory authorities need to be defined within each of the participating countries. And regulatory entities should recognize energy trading as a special commercial activity. This is again coming from the regions that are sort of already, I believe, just one of the South Asian countries does have that in their plan. And then again, the regional master plan that just we actually talked about and countrywide master plan needs to be set up at the earliest before a regional plan is sort of developed. And again, setting up negotiation forums and conditions for enabling the cross discussion between the governments and the private sector stakeholders. The second is again the renewable energy upskill. And when we actually be talking about that, we'll be talking about how do we actually collectively mobilize the financial resources, how do we learn from each other's experiences and different renewable energy mechanisms that are already in place. So again, even if, taking lead from Ms. Birgit also mentioned about diversifying the energy mix. So what we need to initially have is a power exchange mechanism for regional power trade, where excess countries with the excess power generation can export it to other South Asian countries while importing it during the low generation seasons, just like we previously talked about. Renewable energy trades also needs to be coupled with or needs to be accompanied with the technology transfer and to sort of improve the supply as well as reduce the transmission and distribution losses. And government again need to revive and promote the bilateral, multilateral initiatives such as the SAARC Energy Cooperation Framework that was there. That's again going to be the way forward. Talking about the off-grids, again, what we can do is perhaps sort of go, and this is where SDPI can sort of also come in, is to come up with this regional mini-grid operation mechanisms or sort of this platform that can actually be utilized by different member countries to sort of learn from each other's experiences, to have the pool of different stakeholders, the pool of different people. I think this should be actually one of the key focused areas where such a platform can actually be established for the cross learnings, for knowledge sharing, for technology sharing and sharing of the ideas. And such platforms can also have this pool of different investors over there as well. Then I think we've already talked about grid intermittency a lot. localization of renewable energy supply chain in South Asia is again going to be very important in this. What we need to do is perhaps have some joint research programs of South Asian countries, develop a regional database of these technologies that can go with these development. Last slide before I sort of close it is again the finance and how South Asia come up with different mechanisms that can expedite energy finance is going to be extremely important. So just like I talked about, establishing a regional pool of long-term investments that can sort of invest in this long-term financing is going to be of paramount importance sort of. And just I think recently in the COP, we also sort of came up with this Just Energy Transition Partnership model. So perhaps South Asia as a whole can pitch up this regional energy partnership model that can actually get sort of financing from different G7 countries. Last but not the least, the regional carbon market. Some of the South Asian countries does have those bilaterally, but how, just like a Europe or European Union's emission trading system, is there the possibility of coming up with a regional carbon market for South Asia, emission trading system for South Asia? That's actually something that needs to be further explored. So with this, I'll sort of stop here. And again, thanks to the research team that sort of brought up this discussion, including definitely Mahnoor and both Senab. So thank you so much. And I think after the panel discussion, any questions I'll be free to answer. So yeah, thank you so much, Mahnoor. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bayat. Thank you for bringing everyone up to pace regarding what were the findings and recommendations present in the report. With that, I'd like to open up the floor to the panel discussion. So we have around 5 people who will be participating in this panel discussion. So perhaps if I can start with Mr. Hemanta Vitanagi. He is Executive Director at Center for Environmental Justice, Sri Lanka. So Dr. Hemanta, we have 2 questions for you that we would request you to please answer. So first would be, what is the state of cross-border electricity trade or energy trading as a whole in Sri Lanka? And what do you think are some of the major challenges that are hindering its growth? And also if you can then sort of add to that and give 3 policy recommendations or action points that can be pitched to the relevant stakeholders through this platform.
Thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. So as Bayat mentioned, I mean, Sri Lanka is has almost achieved 100% electricity, but unfortunately, we are still using thermal power. We are still using coal power, which is like up to 50 to 60% sometime in some days. So we use coal power. We have a policy that we will achieve 70% renewable energy by 2030. So which is mostly wind and hydro. Wind and solar power. And right now the community power, which I say community power because the rooftop solar is something strongly promoting in Sri Lanka. So that's one of the good news. The regional energy corporation, of course, there was some discussion during the last 2 years, especially Erik Solheim, one of the climate advisor to Sri Lanka. So he has had some communication with the Indian government to set up a underwater cable between India and Sri Lanka for energy cooperation, and its argument is very good, very clear that when we have lack of electricity in certain times of the day, there are enormous amount of energy generated in parts of India. So of course, theoretically, you can transfer that electricity to Sri Lanka and at the same way, so you can sell electricity to India at some times. In connection with this underwater transmission cable, the Adani Group has put a proposal to set up 500 megawatt wind power in Sri Lanka. That has created some issues for us because the price seems So when the wind power unit is less than 5 cents US dollar, and this unit is going to be 8 rupees 28 cents US dollar. So which has created some big issue. It's an unsolicited proposal, and now they have done the environmental impact assessment to build this 250 megawatt wind power mill in the bird migration route. And now, so we have filed legal action against this one. So in general, what I see that the Regional Energy Corporation, while it is sort of a possible and it is positive, but at the same time, now we are dealing with environmental impacts of land grabbing and also destruction of the biodiversity corridors, etc. So I think right now, even the renewable energy, like the solar, that includes land grabbing in forest areas and also reservoirs, and there are many related issues. Now, we never thought about that sort of issues in the past. We have been fighting against the thermal power, coal power, and all things, but not necessarily we had any interest to fight against the renewable energy. But that's unfortunately that's going to be the case in Sri Lanka. So I think we need to understand, in one of the policy decisions we want to have, of course, in principle, we don't have any disagreement with Regional Energy Corporation, but definitely we cannot generate such electricity by destroying the nature or grabbing lands. And definitely we need to understand how green this renewable energy is, so that's one of the biggest concern we have at the moment. So that's one thing. So we have to make sure that we follow all the safeguards and we respect to the other requirements. At the same time, I think the price wise, the India cannot use their power, their political power to sell expensive electricity to Sri Lanka, which is unfortunate, because if we want to share electricity, and if we want to have the cooperation, and that should be on fair the level. So there should be fair decision making in this one, because we have less energy access. That cannot be the reason to sell expensive energy to Sri Lanka. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I actually have a follow-up question as well. So regarding this publication, if you have any comments on it, any feedback regarding it?
Yeah, I think this publication has covered most of the areas, including the issues on just energy transition. I think that's quite important, because we right now we don't have much written information about this one. I think this is a very beginning of that sort of the information. So therefore, this document, this publication, I consider as a very important baseline information for us to engage in this energy policy discussion.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for your insights and your interventions. They're quite useful and they're very well noted. So next, I'd like to invite Dr. Ghulam Samad for his comments and interventions. Sir, you're a senior research specialist at CAREC. So I think the most important thing in this case would be an overview of the CASA 1000 project. So if you can sort of provide us an overview of the objectives in the context of sustainable energy trade between Central Asia and Pakistan, and what are the key implementation challenges that were faced during CASA 1000's implementation, and how is your organization addressing them to ensure its success? And secondly, how do you see CASA 1000 contributing to regional energy security and sustainability and some of the expected economic and environmental benefits for participating countries? And of course, if you can give 3 policy recommendations or action points which can be pitched to relevant stakeholders through this platform. But of course, the last question would also be regarding our publication, and if you have any comments or feedback regarding it.
Thank you so much. But could you allow me, before I say the sharing of the screen, I just want to highlight one of the slides before I commence on the question you raised.
Yes, the IT team is going to provide access to you. Just give them a minute, please. You can share it now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Obaid. Thank you so much, SGPI, for the invitation. Good afternoon from Carrick Institute, Urumqi, China. I will be very quickly relate the CASA 1000 slides, a very big slide presentation with what Obaid already highlighted. And to me, it seems that the suggestion, the policy recommendation, what brought by Obaid in a presentation, I believe this could be a very good case study that why, unfortunately, with some reason, we are not developing this cross-border energy trade. And we have lots from here, from this CASA 1000 as a case study could be learned. So here, colleagues, from the structure, you can see the CASA, the Central Asia and South Asia 1000 project. It started from Kyrgyzstan to Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. In here on the circle, down the right corner in the caption, you guys can see the different dots line, the different kind of technologies, different circles. I don't want to go there, but just wanted very briefly to highlight the structure of the CASA project and how. Did you lost me, Obaid, or am I okay?
We can hear you, sir. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So this is about the CASA, but I think the 4 or 5 fundamental objectives that were the basis for the CASA project. One, the countries really wanted to develop the competitive prices where the energy trade could happen, which eventually could definitely enable diversification of energy resources. That was the key. The second key objective of this CASA project were 2. First, there was like in Central Asia, the rich idle resources are there. So they wanted to develop on this uneven distribution of energy resources in the region, and of course to adjust with their seasonal complementarity across the Central Asia and South Asia. Also, the third objective that was enhancement of the industries that are cross borders, so the energy delivery to the cross-border industries could be easily available, so that the region cross-border trade could also be enhanced. And finally, the purpose was to increase the competition and lower the cost, so that there could be a win-win situation for all these 4 countries. But colleagues, if you can look into the history, and don't want to go to the history of the CASA 1000 project, but see for the last 20 years, definitely I agree all those suggestion recommendation brought by Obaid, for example, legal and commercial structuring, the financial feasibilities, construction, everything, they are very complicated. But at the same time, if we can look into the 20 years, still we are looking forward to this project. And unfortunately, this project is yet to kick off their production. Some of the numbers, and that's why I want to present it here to link with what Obaid presentation. Like in terms of a suggestion recommendation, it's really very easy. But when it comes to the practicality of the cross-border energy projects, it's been really challenging. So for example, I took just one of the indicator, and that is tower construction by country. I don't want to go to all those engineering related indicators, but just one of them. And clearly from the completion percentages for Pakistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, we can clearly see where these countries are been standing, and this was the data until last October 2022. I did not upgraded the data, but still the construction was halted in Afghanistan. Recently, World Bank re-announced it, and I do believe there will be some more progress very soon. Here, this was the overall progress on the key components. And again, don't want to go there, but for example, on the left side, started from the transmission line to all those different details are there. Clearly, we can see which country had been lagging still for the last 20 years. So what colleagues I want to highlight here, that the CASA project for the last 20 years is there. There's a lots of challenges in terms of the implementation. Now, we'll little bit elaborate more on the implementation challenges, and I pick one of the reason here to see how much basically this delay in specific site in Pakistan could cost the overall project. So for example, the Nowshera site that I mentioned in my slide, that was delayed initially for a couple of years. And clearly here, you can see how much this project costs the rest of the whole project. And again, don't want to go to the details. For example, there are lots of interrelated activity. For example, if there's activity stopped in Pakistan, definitely it will affect the activity in Afghanistan, in Kyrgyzstan, in Tajikistan. So those kind of interrelated activities that will definitely be affected, and the cost will enhance. So just wanted to highlight one of the delay. There are many delays happen across the this COSA project started from Kyrgyzstan to Pakistan. So just imagine how much this one delays could cost the implementation of the projects. So coming, Maroon, to your question about the implementation challenges, I think here are 7, 8 key kind of challenges that I would say are responsible for the delays of this project. One, of course, all of us are much familiar, the cross-border issues. And it's not specific to Pakistan and Afghanistan, but in Central Asia, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, they do have their own cross-border issues. So when we go for the implementation of the OBEID recommendation, we have to be very careful for the cross-border issues. Otherwise, there will be delays that I just mentioned here. Similarly, also in OBEID's presentation, he mentioned about the integration of the completion schedule. Though, like with all those engineering work, all the projects across all the 4 countries, they try to align, harmonize their developmental activities, construction activities as well. But unfortunately, there are delays, and that's why they are not integrating, and they bring much delays to the project. The third one's again mentioned by OBEID in presentation, the COVID one, and particularly for CASA, when the phase of implementation was started in 2019, the machinery that was supposed to be imported, there were many site visits that were postponed and halted. That significantly the COVID-19 caused delays to the COSA projects. For the coordination, again, colleagues, like we do have an institutional mechanism. The headquarters is here in Almaty. The ministerial level colleagues meet there, but still the coordination is one of the key consideration for the delays. And just to quote here, the finalization of the account bank agreement. I'm not sure for the last year development, but it seems to me there was some development, but still the delay over there to open a giant kind of account where all the expenditure and revenue could be dispersed. 5, nothing new, but of course the land settlement dispute, it's been everywhere across these 4 countries. There were lots of committee, lots of engagement were there, and they were trying to resolve it. So that's why the delays in COSA projects has been caused. The 6, this again seems to me one of the important consideration. As per the CASA 1000 agreement, there must be an open access regime, and the open access regime had to start 18 months before the resumption of the CASA 1000 project. But still, as I mentioned here, for the open access regime, Pakistan and Tajikistan case are still not very optimal. And of course, there was an agreement, part of the agreement, there could be a reverse power flow from Pakistan to Tajikistan that has still not been kind of a deconsideration in the agreement. And financial gaps always there. The World Bank, and along with World Bank, Islamic Development Bank, other developmental agencies, and been very keen to implement and provide much more funding for the implementation and completion of this project. Colleagues recently in last February and March were being reinitiated the completion of this project just because of the stranded asset were there and huge investment has been there, but they now really wants to complete it. So the work has been in Afghanistan kicked off. And lastly, all about the operation and the maintenance arrangement that need to be there on annual basis. Last slide, colleague, this is about the project-related risk. In here, I summarize 6 main, I would say, the risks when it comes to the cross-border energy trade. First, there need to be a predictability and efficient manner of the energy flow. Still consideration in Central Asia, particularly in Kyrgyzstan, about this water issues are there. So maybe there will be a volatility in the availability of the quantity due to hydrological variation. Secondly, there could be risk to get the financial closure. And maybe, as I mentioned here, the credibility of takers might be you should not get whatever you want to get in return of the provision of the electricity. Mentioned by Ubaid, I don't want to go to the capacity constraint issues. Coordination has been mentioned there. But again, we need a transparency and a mechanism for the revenue management when it comes to the energy exports from the CASA 1000. And this was the initial one of the consideration. This high voltaic direct DC technology was kind of a risk when they integrate the HVDC with the HVAC. So these were, colleagues, some of the project related risks I just wanted to highlight. So colleagues, I stop here and looking forward for more questions if you have any. But on the studies is presented by Ubaid, really timely, and I can see lots of good recommendation. But I just want to highlight that from the CASA 1000, we need to dig down to CASA 1000. What are the impediments? Basically, has been delaying this CASA 1000 project for the last, I would say, many years now. And we can learn from here and can consider for the other policy recommendation mentioned by Ubaid in his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samad. Your interventions are very well noted and quite valuable. I'd like to move on to our next panelist. We have Mr. Ehsan Javed present with us here. So, sir, as research fellow at the SAARC Energy Center, I have 2 questions from you. How do you see the potential of energy trading across South Asia, and how this region can collectively expedite its transition towards sustainable energy sources? Also, what do you believe are the key factors that will be a leading role, such as political ownership or others? And if you can give 3 policy recommendations or action points that can be pitched to relevant stakeholders through this platform, and of course, feedback on the study as well.
Thank you very much for the speak.
So, if it's not too much trouble, we'd request you to come and speak. Yes, please.
Okay, so thank you very much, first of all, to SDPI and FNF for giving me the opportunities to speak on this forum. So I've heard from the different experts and also heard the detailed presentation from Ubaid. It was very insightful, and we also had a chance to learn a lot from it. So I'll just try to give a brief overview, although a lot have been already said by talks of Ubaid and other experts during their presentations or during their talk. So first of all, when we talk about South Asia region, the overview of South Asia region. So region already mentioned by Ubaid that this region lacks energy right now. For example, quarter population of the South Asian region does not have access to electricity in these modern times. Plus on top of that, half population lacks the resource of clean energy for heating and for cooking purposes. So most of them are cutting trees and using the traditional biomass, which in this 21st century is very strange. I mean, we compare this to other regions across the world. Apart from Africa, all the regions have got the clean energy resource for their rural areas also, but we lack on that part. Secondly, all the member states of South Asia are dependent on fossil fuels, for imported fossil fuels, and that contributes to the foreign exchange, which is transmitted back to the other countries, if I'm quoting the term rightly. And what happens is that the whole region is dependent on that fossil fuel, which is imported, and then the energy security of the region is compromised in that sense. Plus, on top of that, we as a region have a price volatility in the energy prices of coal, oil, gas, and electricity. Because when the prices of those commodities are increased, or if dollar exchange rate is increased, so then we do suffer because of that. So the effects of that fossil fuel on the regional and the international side, we see a lot on the climate change side. We have seen the effects of climate change in our region for the past 20, 30 years. What we have seen is that there have been increased amount of glacier outbursting lakes, plus there are lots of floods and increased amount of heat in the urban regions, which is directly responsible to the climate change. And we need to address that also. So if we talk about climate change, then 75% of the global or the regional emissions are because of the fossil fuel burning. So it's the climate change nowadays is not a concern of the international region. It's more of the regional side. We need to accommodate, we need to use the indigenous resources which are clean and which are available at a lower cost, which we can provide it to the people of South Asia. So on the energy reserve side, we have seen slide from Abed, which tells a lot about the coal, oil, and gas reserves, which are already available in the South Asia region. Plus, we have lots of reserves of hydropower and solar and wind in the region. We have seen that in Bhutan, in Nepal, in Pakistan, India, all of these regions have excess amount of solar energy in their region, plus wind has lots of resource in this region, and we have not been able to tap the potential which is already available. Maybe 10%, I guess Abed was saying something about 15% for the hydropower. So there's huge potential of tapping up that renewable energy and clean resources in the region. And then on top of that, after that, we could provide this and then replace the already available fossil fuel sources in the region. So that energy transition has to take place, because we are giving at a higher price, plus we are also blunting the effects of climate change, and it is not indigenous. So all these problems are multifold in their nature. So right now, the potential for energy trading. So there's huge potential of energy trading, like for example, Nepal, Bhutan, they have huge reservoirs of hydropower, and the reservoirs or the resources are more than their requirement. For example, India is importing something like 1600 or 1800 megawatt of electricity from Nepal. And what happens is that somewhere in the presentation of my colleague from CAREG, he was mentioning that the seasonal invariability and the resource variability of renewable energy matches with each other. So I'll try to give you an example of case of Bhutan and India. So Bhutan has a contract with India for importing electricity during the summer season. So in summer season, Bhutan is a mountainous region, so they have reduced amount of energy requirement in those regions. So in the same summer season, India has increased amount of electricity requirement because of the increased amount of AC loads in their urban areas. So what happens is that hydropower electricity, which is excess in Bhutan in the summer season, that is transported or given back to India in the summer season. While on the other hand, when in winter season, the India's requirement goes down, while the Bhutan requirements goes up, because in winter they need electricity to heat up their homes. Plus, on top of that, hydropower resource is not available in Bhutan in the months of winter months. So then they import back the electricity from India in winter months. So this is kind of a seasonal variation available in neighboring countries, in neighboring regions, and we could also try to get involved with this arrangement whereby we could import electricity from Afghanistan or Iran, and then try to take out a detailed map for development of regional integration within this region, South Asia plus the Central Asia. So there is a lot of research, there's a lot of reports already done for the framework agreement, which was finalized in 2014-15. It's already signed by main member states of South Asia, plus the policy regulations and the regulatory framework were developed and already disseminated among the member states, then the settlement mechanism, if there is power trade going on between two countries, what if there is some issue between the member states? So dispute settlement mechanism is already established among South Asia. So a lot of technical work is already done. So what we need to do is that on the policy making side, they need to take up the initiative, and then all the groundwork is already available, because we can see that India is already trading electricity with Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. Plus nowadays they are also building pipeline, gas pipeline, oil pipelines to Bangladesh and Nepal. So there is huge amount of trade going on in the whole region except Pakistan. So Pakistan need to step up its interventions, and then we can carry on with that. So I guess this is the first part of your question. Do you have another one?
Basically, recommendations.
You were saying something. Okay. So on the recommendation side, well, we have, I would like to table some 3 or 4 recommendations. First is acquiring investment towards the utility scale and the decentralized renewable energy projects in the country. So we need to acquire investment through international or national or regional. So that needs to be done. Secondly, there's a huge potential of battery storage solutions for grid stability. A lot has been said about gas turbines used for grid stability, but nowadays in the whole world, grid stability is done through battery storage. There are a lot of big projects being done in the European countries, which are cost feasible compared to the gas turbines. The third one, I would like to say a very new field has come up nowadays on the production facility of hydrogen for consumption among the economy. So India is building a lot of commercial hydrogen project in their country. Pakistan had already approved a policy. I don't know, there was some plan on that one, but that didn't materialize. So hydrogen has the potential to give you clean energy, and that hydrogen can be produced through enormous amount of renewable energy sources which are already available in Pakistan. And that hydrogen can be stored, and that can be used at a later time for grid stability or for consumption of the industry, because 70 to 80% of hydrogen is used in the industry, in mining, in chemical industry, in the fertilizer industry. So that is normally used by the methane reformation process, which is, fossil fuel source. So that could be replaced by green hydrogen, which is produced by renewable energy sources. Plus, second last is the increased electrification in transport and industry sector. Nowadays, globally, we also see a trend that fossil fuel vehicles are being discouraged and electric vehicles are encouraged. So we have got the policy. We need to work on the infrastructure side. Lastly, I think I have already spoken to the regional grid connectivity. So the grid connectivity of these regional countries need to be established. Infrastructure needs to be developed. Before that, some policy or regulatory, if there is any missing part on the policy side, that needs to be done. So unless and until we can achieve that part, we cannot hope for any regional trade going on between these SAARC member states. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ehsan Saab. Your recommendations are very well noted. Next, we also have Mr. Shaukat Ali, who's joined us online. So, sir, as a regional program expert, South Asia at the Alliance for Rural Electrification, I have again a couple of questions that I'd like you to address. So, firstly, how can rural electrification initiatives be aligned with national and regional policies to promote the use of renewable energy sources and enhance overall energy resilience in South Asia? Secondly, how do you see the potential of South Asian countries learning from each other's experiences around energy provisions, particularly for impoverished regions? And again, if you can also give us 3 policy recommendations or action points that you'd like be conveyed to the key stakeholders through this platform. And lastly, I'd request you for comments and feedback on the report itself. So,
thank you very much. So first of all, I would like to thank SDPI and FNF for giving me the opportunity to speak today. In terms of the policy document, it's a very good quality document. I mean, looking at the presentation, it gives all the information what we need for the energy trade among the member states in the region. The challenges and potential that most of us we know, So this is a good policy document, and we should look for the implementation. You know, in terms of policy, there are policies in each and every country of the member states, but I mean, implementation is a challenge. So we should work on the implementation of the policy recommendations. You know, every government, I mean, coming to your first question in terms of the rural electrification initiatives, alignment with the national and regional policies. So, I mean, as the concept note described the energy situation and demand in the South Asian region, every government has some kind of policy for energy transition to reduce the energy imports, of course, utilize the indigenous potential of renewable energy, and reduce the carbon footprints. But I mean, nevertheless, we know, and we should also focus on the climatic vulnerabilities of the region. However, rural electrification has so far been the least considered areas of the governments nationally and on a regional basis for several factors: remoteness of villages, communities, cost of grid extension, and low density of population in terms of the political spectrum. Therefore, there is a need to focus on adopting policies and priorities for electrification of rural population through decentralized. I mean, there is a lot of talk in the study document and also in the presentation about decentralized renewable energy, and this is what ARE, that where I work, Alliance for Rural Electrification, we're focusing on not only nationally in Pakistan and Nepal and Bangladesh, but on a regional level, and to develop a framework for the implementation in the region. Your second question, how do you see the potential of South Asian countries learning from each other? This is a very good question. And I think more relevant to the situation we have in the region. Majority of the South Asian states are rich in renewable energy potential. We have hydropower, we have seen in the study and the presentation, and we have some good examples to learn from in the region and share these experiences within the region for larger impacts. India, for instance, this was mentioned, is a very good example. They have almost more than 90% or 95% coverage in terms of electrification of population in the rural areas, I mean, almost nationally. Bhutan was mentioned, Sri Lanka and Nepal. But I mean, in terms, one is the connectivity to the electricity, like access to energy. The other one is renewable energy access. Because in terms of Sri Lanka, Nepal, and some areas in India, they are producing electricity from biomass and from diesel-based generation, which of course they have given access to their population, but in terms of environment and in terms of other climatic conditions, I mean, we should be moving more towards renewable energy generation and supply. And like I mentioned earlier, we should move on to the DRE's solutions to reduce our focus on the biofuels. In terms of, I'm looking from a document, so sorry. Okay, in terms of the potential, we know there is a need for regional cooperation to share experiences, as Hassan Saab mentioned, and learning and help others in the region. Regional cooperation, however, need a political and administrative environment where we can work together and implement our policies. In terms of the three recommendations, I have one on the renewable energy generation strategy and policy. Like I mentioned, every country has a energy policy, but I mean, there is less on the renewable energy generation and supply. So renewable energy should be the focus of every energy policy in our member states. Rural electrification, as I mentioned, is the least considered area. So this is the solution for our off-grid areas and the population, about 30 to 40 million people. I mean, even in Pakistan, they are without access to electricity. So thereby, we have to focus on rural electrification as a priority. The third one, energy stability requires better political understanding among states. A regional cooperation strategy to exchange learning, share experience, and work together for a regional economic prosperity is the need and I think we should be working on that. So this is what I have in mind. A lot has been said in the study and the presentation and by my colleagues. So this is just an overall view of the situation we have and the recommendation. If there is any question, I'm available to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saab. I'd like to move on to my next speaker now, last but not the least, of course, Dr. Khalid Waleed. He's Research Fellow at SDPI. So, when we're talking about energy transition and regional collaboration, I think it's very pertinent to talk about carbon trading as well, which is a globally growing phenomena, right? So, basically, my questions to you are going to be if you can elaborate on some of the alternate financing mechanisms, such as carbon trading, and then the potential of developing a South Asian carbon market, right? So, and of course, thirdly, top 3 recommendations that we can pitch to the relevant stakeholders from this platform. And of course, we'd like your feedback on the report as well. If it's not too much trouble, if you can please come here.
Thank you so much, Manu. Thank you so much, FNF, for organizing this very timely consultation and launching this report. Thank you so much, Ubaid, and the authors. Congratulations for this very insightful report. Let me not repeat all these things that have been very eloquently highlighted by the previous speakers. Those are very pertinent and targeted sort of interventions and insights that have been given by previous speakers. Let me just come to what is the linkage between climate, economy, and energy, particularly from a regional context of South Asia. What I have seen that there are hard borders when it comes to South Asia in any given circumstances, whether it is economy, whether it is energy, whether it is trade. So hard border, this is one thing that we need to keep in mind. There is another term recently initiated that has borders in it, and that might integrate South Asia as a region. And this term is a carbon border adjustment mechanism initiated by European Union. What does CBAM or carbon border adjustment mechanism do? It sort of initiate this carbon intensity assessment of exports to European Union, which means if there is more carbon intensity to export or production in products that have been produced in South Asia, the European Union, they are going to tax or put a carbon emission fee on them. So in that way, the export competitiveness would be lost. So one particular solution is that we invest in renewable energy, we integrate more variable renewable energy sources, as Ubaid rightly indicated that there is potential in South Asia. Second is that we try to look for offsetting mechanisms such as carbon markets, particularly the regional carbon markets. There is an index known as CBAM Exposure Index by World Bank. And if you see, you'll see that the national grid of Pakistan is 1.6 times more carbon intensive as compared to EU. If you compare the India's national grid with EU's grid, you will see that it is 1.96 times more carbon intensive. Bangladesh is 1.7 times, which means if the industries are using electricity from those grids and they are exporting those products to EU, then this sort of anomaly will subject to higher CBAM certificates. So we need to look for that as well. Establishing a regional carbon market, offsetting mechanisms, renewable energy integration, that would be the way forward. And we all know that for renewable energy comes the intermittency issues. The world famous and most effective renewable energy market is the European Union's market, where you will see that because of regional connections, interconnections, that renewable energy market is thriving, and because of regional trade of electricity, the intermittency issue is being solved. So using this carrot and stick approach, carrot of carbon markets, regional carbon markets, and stick of CBAM, carbon border adjustment mechanism, we can sort of defeat these hard borders and adopt these borderless initiatives induced by climate change. So this is the linkage between climate, energy, and when it comes to regional trading. So this could be one thing. Second thing, in my opinion, would be localization. I think South Asia has potential to indigenize the production of these renewable energy technologies so that we can not only trade electricity, but equipment, instruments that are instrumental for electricity production in terms of renewable energy. That would be great as well. Third thing, maybe the role of digitalization, a mutual digitalization platform, particularly for climate finance and renewable energy finance, that would be very instrumental for the region, because region is facing, maybe there are hard borders, but in terms of socio-economic development, the region is facing same issues, particularly on the household front. So another aspect to it is household energy transition. We clearly see that there are many people who lack clean energy supply in South Asia at household level. So to attaining SDG 7, we need to cater for that as well. My recommendations, I'm not going to repeat these. Those are very valuable insights have been given by previous speakers. What I am going to propagate is include climate change into macroeconomic policy making, so that because climate change knows no borders, so it will get easier to sort of resolve these hot border issues and make authorities and stakeholders come to a joint agenda of climate change. Second, my colleague from SARC Energy Center, maybe we need to sort of rename SARC, reorient it to climate change. It will remain SARC. Maybe the new proposed name is South Asia's Resilience to Climate Change. It is again SARC, SARCCC, but it will be, maybe it will provide us a platform where all the countries can agree on initiating these sort of innovative mechanisms such as regional trading. Lastly, establish this carbon markets initiative. Regional carbon markets, they are very effective, particularly combined with CBAM, particularly when it comes to hard to abate sector, particularly when it comes to export competitiveness in extended future trade, because now the trade has this climate aspect, and the more we go into future, more it will integrate it into it. Lastly, comments on report, it is very timely, very foundation sort of thing, upon which we can build on. Maybe next phase of this can focus on more carrot and stick approaches, particularly regional carbon markets, sector coupling, as rightly mentioned by Ahsan Javed Saab, that hydrogen is one thing that can couple different sectors together, particularly in a regional context, particularly for Pakistan, where wind energy is being curtailed in massive amounts. So if we install this hydrogen production facilities alongside these wind plants, we can sort of produce green hydrogen and then regionally trade. And last thing is again household energy transition. Maybe the next iteration of this report can delve deeper into how we can achieve household level energy transition through regional collaboration and achieve SDG 7. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you very much, Khalid Saab, for your interventions. With that, the panel discussion comes to an end, and I'd like to open the floor to questions, if there are any, even from the speaker or the participants that are online.
Firstly, I would like to thank all the panelists for such an insightful discussion. As we talked about CASA project and its implementation delays, I was just curious to know that what are the main reasons or factors that contribute to this implementation delay and cost overruns, particularly regarding the regulatory framework and challenges. And secondly, what strategies can be implemented to address these issues effectively? Thank you.
Thank you, Zainab. Are there any other questions? So, Dr. Samad, I think this question is particularly towards you, if you can please answer.
Could you please repeat the question? I didn't hear it clearly. Could you repeat it again, please?
Okay, so I'm basically asking that what are the main reasons for the implementation delay and overall costs in the CASA project, the implementation of CASA project? And what are the basic regulatory challenges that needs to be addressed in the short term?
So thank you so much. I think, let me say very frankly, the biggest challenge is the implementation at the governance stage. And currently, probably you are hard or aware of the World Bank is the guarantor of this project. So all these transactions, if you recall my history of the CASA 1000, there is like from 2006 to until now, and each and every stage, the World Bank has been engaged there. And there are like, I would say, hundreds of entities are engaged there. And bringing those hundreds of entities from infrastructure to construction to everything, right? From LC, like everything, World Bank has been engaged there. So it seems to me the implementation at all these 1,300 something kilometers, it starts from Kyrgyzstan to here, the range is total transmission lines, I believe, are more than 1,300 kilometers. So the governance at the implementation stage are extremely important. And I do think that the role of World Bank is there, very proactively World Bank is engaged there, but bringing all those different entities to a table for a discussion, for consensus, for harmonization is one of the biggest challenges. So this is A. B, I still see the coordination failure among the member countries. We do have a CASA secretariat at Almaty, and I forgot my colleague Vyacheslav. He is the energy specialist based in Almaty, and he joined us online as well. The ministerial level representation is there, but unfortunately, when it's come to a very pragmatic and proactive engagement in terms of the coordination from all those 4 countries to resolve a not a smaller, but an issue, for example, you should have a bank account where all those disbursements should take place, right? Unfortunately, they did not resolve until last year. So there's lots of examples. For Pakistan, I just give you one example of Rashakai. The one of the end of the CASA 1000 is basically in Rashakai, and the land dispute kind of resolution did not resolve for 2 years. And the role of NTDC is also one of the consideration there. And that one delay, just give you example from the numbers, it cost this whole project in millions of the dollars, right? So these are some of the considerations which are there, and unfortunately did not complete this whole project very timely. Do I mention like the role of the COVID for almost 3 years, again, significantly halted the operation of the, for example, I mentioned the importation of the machinery for all those projects, right? The role of Afghanistan is again very significant, a major factor is there, right? So, and of course, there's a border consideration between Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. So all those issues, when it comes to really for the implementation, it's bring a challenge for the project. That's why I do believe the publication brought by SDPI, presented by Obaid, very fascinating. But when it comes to the implementation of all those policy recommendations, from the grid integration to all those different things, right? It would be a much challenging. Currently, Vyacheslav is here, like in Central Asia. Now we are going for this. If you recall the USSR, they had this integrated energy system, and after the 1990, it's disintegrated. Now some of the countries, border countries, of course, all of them are border, but the border grid exchanges, they are moving toward the integration of this grid connectivity. but still lots of challenges are there. Even though they speak same language internally, they have less kind of a border issues. So yeah, these are some of the recommendations that I just wanted to highlight here. But for me, the governance structure correction at the implementation level is the key. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samad. Any more questions? No? Okay, so I'd like to end the discussion over here then and request Dr. Khalid Waleed for closing remarks and any relevant action points.
Again, thank you so much. A lot have been said. Those are very insightful things, very timely, I would say very pertinent. What we need to sort of ensure is that these reports, these findings, they sort of being conveyed to the right stakeholders, particularly in policy level, not only in Pakistan, but at the regions level. Secondly, there is more need at this time to have this integrated approach, particularly given this crisis of climate change, crisis of economic security, crisis of human security. So as DPI, with the support of FNF, we will sort of propagate and we will convey these findings, insights to the relevant stakeholders, and will keep on organizing these events involving experts from different countries, from the region. With this, I thank you all. I thank all the panelists, particularly Dr. Ghulam Samad from CARIC, Mr. Shaukat Ali, joined from Alliance for Rural Electrification, Mr. Ahsan Javed, who has always been so kind to us, representing SORC Energy Center, Mr. Hemanatha Vitnege, I'm sorry if I am not pronouncing it right, joining it from Sri Lanka. And again, Ms. Birgit Lam for your support. Lastly, to the authors, Ubaid, Zainab, and Manur for this wonderful report. I think the platform has been established. We can build on with the help of SORC Energy Center and all the other experts. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll keep on organizing these wonderful and collaborative sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Khalid. With this, the session comes to an end. Thank you everyone who has joined us. But before we proceed to tea, I'd request the authors of the report and our panelists present here for a quick photo holding the publication. Also, Anita and Ms. Sam, I request you to join as well. The panelists who are present online will also be part of the photo. हाँ, इधर सब आ जाए.
Should there be lights? Yeah.
हाँ, वो lights. इमरान, ये lights कहाँ से on होगी? ओह, अच्छा, ठीक है. उबैद, आप भी इधर ही आ जाएं. ज़ैनब. हाँ, ताकि ये वाले panelists भी आ जाएं. ठीक है, इसको इस तरह से adjust कर लें.
Long for yeah. Still treated some back before on the phone.
Even today, I think people are saying it's better to postpone it because there's chances that India coming to protest. I think it is annoying. It's just,
Yeah, but I mean, it can happen every day. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, last day there was Sunday, so Jamaat Islami. Last night. I mean, you didn't know anything.
Exactly,
We're
exactly.
thinking about it, and now it's like.
ये साइड पे हो सकता है?
In the middle.
ये साइड पे हो सकता है इमरान?
The office in the middle.
Do you have one? Because यहाँ पे पड़ी हुई है. Please do not leave without having tea. It's served in the restaurant upstairs.
Only for the Friday when my son is traveling to Lahore.
Oh,
So
okay.
she wouldn't be here for the opening remarks.
Okay, no problem. Perhaps if they can give a recorded message or if you can give the opening remark.
You can do those things.